One of the best ways to get an edge in your dynasty league is to be proactive, trying to read the tea leaves rather than reacting to news. And today, Jeff Bell and I, we are going to try to look ahead at some players this offseason that could spike in value that you can go out and acquire now before they blow up. And Jeff, the first guy we want to talk about here, Mac Jones. Now, I think a lot of people think that this is just done with. Mac Jones started his handful of games. He looked okay for the 49ers, and that's it. But you and I were talking that there might be some long-term value here that people aren't really catching on to yet.
Yeah, we know Mac Jones was a first round pick. We know that Mac Jones had a really strong rookie season, really strong start to his career. And now he has spent some time in Kyle Shanahan University, in the McVay offensive scheme university that we see so many of these quarterbacks, and it fits the profile of Baker Mayfield, of Sam Darnold, of these guys that they're former first round picks. They had a little bit of success or flamed out or got a new opportunity, and everybody across this league is running this offense. So that's where a real key of it is.
Mhm.
And Mac Jones has looked good to the point where you start to ask the question a little bit: has Mac Jones looked a little bit too good? Has Mac Jones looked like Kyle Shanahan might be making some choices? And there was, unsubstantiated rumors that there were some manipulation, whatever you want to say, about I missed that word completely, but Brock Purdy's contract. It was the rumors were that they did some things with Brock Purdy's contract this summer. Unsubstantiated, I don't know, but I think it's definitely open for conversation. And I think when you look around the league, we know the open potential spots at quarterback, and especially this year. I know I'm feeling it in my dynasty leagues really bad, where like I had Kyler Murray and I had Tua Tagovailoa and I had CJ Stroud, and like feeling like, oh, I'm locked in here. I'm good as of like a year ago or two. And now it's like I'm five alarm panic. What am I going to do with these quarterback situations in these leagues? And so grabbing players like this, it just turns out it works out. And I think Jones is exactly the type of prototype of a team to go out there and plug him in there, somebody that's desperate in their quarterback situation. I mean, I think the Minnesota Vikings right now wouldn't mind at all having Mac Jones in that room, and that is a team that runs that same offense.
You could almost see like the Carolina Panthers. Like, I don't know how much more leash they want to give to Bryce Young. There's a lot of teams out there right now that we could see some changes with. The Las Vegas Raiders. I know this year they wanted to do the Pete Carroll, Geno Smith, Tyler Lockett thing and see how that worked out. But I think that's probably going to be a 1 year plan. We'll see what they do going into next year. But like, there's so many teams that you can just envision Mac Jones as a potential starter there. And I think the spiciest one, Jeff, might be the San Francisco 49ers. And I know that sounds like crazy right now. Some people are already giving the thumbs down on YouTube, and people are going to sound off in the comments. But 2 years ago, it was just unbelievable to think that they would go with a seventh round rookie over the guy that they drafted inside the top three. I mean, we know that like when it comes to contracts and draft capital, those things don't matter to Kyle Shanahan. It's who is playing better football. And if they start getting through summer camp and getting through OTAs and all that sort of stuff, and Mac Jones is outplaying Brock Purdy, there are going to be some difficult decisions to have. Now, whether that means Brock Purdy gets traded or maybe somebody calls Mac Jones up and offers or calls the 49ers up and offers something for Mac Jones that they just can't say no to. I think really what you're doing here is just betting on talent. And Mac Jones, it was a weird time in New England, and I can't really blame them for taking the chance on Drake May when you know the caliber of the player that Drake May is. But Mac Jones has all of the telltale signs of somebody who's going to be in the NFL long term, whether it's bouncing around as a journeyman, getting his opportunity as a starter, sticking somewhere long term. You just want to bet on a first round player who has been performing with multiple teams now. And I think that his story is far from
Yeah,
over.
and I think really, if we could talk real quick about methodology and some of where we came up with some of these players or the things that we're looking at for players that could rise in value this offseason, it really is contingent upon free agency, upon contracts, about how can these situations open wide up. Or the other thing is some of these players are going to be shaking free and looking for a better landing spot, an opportunity to be a starting running back. And Javonte Williams is a perfect example of this, that if you were buying Javonte Williams at this time last year, and I did sometimes, so I've been happy with that. And I think that looking at situations like that, that just these guys that have been kind of cast aside as being backup running backs in fantasy football or just forgotten about, or I think that looking at some of those situations, then also remembering too the players behind them on the depth chart that could rise with given opportunity if somebody departs.
So that is a perfect segue to the next guy that I would like to talk about here, Jeff. Tyler Algier. a guy who we saw as a rookie rush for 1,000 yards, and then the team went out and drafted Bijan Robinson, and he has been the Robin to Bijan Robinson's Batman ever since. But his contract comes to an end this year. Now, I'm sure the Falcons would love to go out and just pay Tyler Algier and bring him back. They've got a good 1-2 punch working there. But the reality is he could hit free agency. And I think still a young player who has shown very good upside throughout his young NFL career is going to get an opportunity to play elsewhere. So this to me, I mean, not quite the level of prospect of as Javonte Williams. You know, Javonte Williams was hitting efficiency metrics and had a profile that Tyler Algier doesn't quite have, but still a guy with reasonable draft capital who's looked good throughout his career. He's most likely going to get a chance to be, if not a starter, a similar situation to where he is right now, one of those guys that I think a lot of people are trying to move off from because Bijan Robinson's role is growing and you can't really rely on Tyler Algier on a week in, week out basis. And I think that opens up an opportunity to get him for very, very cheap. And he's somebody that I think if we're forecasting 6 months from now, his value, regardless of where he goes, is almost assuredly going to be higher than it is today.
Yeah, and I think you really touched on a lot of key things there, and so acquiring these players at this point of the year, and especially some of these running backs, I think at this point of the year where we're thinking in a redraft mindset, we're looking at them as backups. I mean, you can go to our friends at Keep Trade Cut and look back at what happened with Javonte Williams' value or some of these other players that have landed in these situations. What happens with their offseason dynasty value? It moves in a meaningful way. And these are windows now where so much of the conversation that we hear about, everybody's kind of talking about how everybody thinks the same thing, or how there's a group think and there's no values, there's no true values out there. I think that this is a situation looking at for these contracts that could expire. I mean, it didn't really play out this year, but Evan Ingram's another example of a player. Last year his contract
Mhm.
was structured so that he was either going to be given a meaningful extension or he was going to be released, and he was released from Jacksonville, let go. That created opportunity for Brenton Strange. Now, and we saw Brenton Strange come back off of IR, and he had, I think, 80 some yards or so, 70 some yards. Maybe he had a decent week
Mhm.
this past week for the Jaguars coming off of IR, but that's a great example of a situation. And that's the other thing to look for, too, because the Jaguars took Brenton Strange in the second round of the draft. And he was way under the radar because of Evan Ingram and because of all those things that are involved in that. Kind of sat for a year, didn't do anything, then had another year as a backup to Evan Ingram. Obviously, taking him in the second round, there was planning there that he was going to be the guy that they were going to go with. And then that creates a situation. Evan Ingram shakes free. If you sold Evan Ingram this summer, you probably did pretty well for yourself because we know that value has not maintained with him landing in Denver.
Yeah, and we each came up with a few guys that we wanted to talk about in today's show. But as you're talking about that, I immediately go to James Conner is the guy that pops into my mind right now. And not going out and buying James Conner, but you talked about Evan Ingram. Like if you look at the contract, it showed that he was still under contract in Jacksonville for multiple years, but they built this team friendly out into the contract. James Conner has something very similar right now. And you look at it, technically his contract extends through the 2026 season. They can release him this year for $2.2 million in dead cap, which would save them over $8 million on their books next year. And similarly to what the Jaguars did with Brenton Strange, they went out and they drafted Trey Benson and they invested meaningful draft capital into Trey Benson. And we haven't really seen it so far. You know, he was in James Conner's shadow his rookie season. We see the opportunity come here in year two, and he immediately gets hurt. But this is a guy right now that people probably aren't selling because he's a young running back, and we know that he's coming back from injury right now. But a lot of people think that he still has another year with James Conner, when the reality is if Cardinals do exercise that out and move on from James Conner after this year, Trey Benson is another player who is going to skyrocket in value. And a lot of people aren't talking about it right now.
Yeah, I think that Benson, you almost get the benefit of him being on IR all the year, kind of delaying that breakout.
Right.
And to some extent, maybe
Mhm.
that gives the Cardinals pause on moving on from James Conner with Benson there. So maybe they make that
Fair.
decision of we didn't get the full year of seeing Benson in this lead role. Are we ready to go there? But I think that one area to look for, if you're looking to figure out some of these things, I think a lot of people look at the pending free agents, the 2026 free agents. Look at the
Right.
2027 free agents. Like Michael Pittman is standing out there. He's got a big balloon on the end of his contract. That could force some action. Tyreek Hill is a 2027 free agent, and there's already been talk about him being involved in trade rumors. But some of these players that might shake free look at 2027, they'll jump the line, they'll get cut because of cap reasons or whatever else it might be. And then they become these players that can have different changes of value or grabbing those young players behind them.
And you talk about Michael Pittman, they could release him for $5 million in dead cap this offseason. If they choose to keep him in 2026, it's going to cost them $29 million. So Michael Pittman, a good NFL receiver, but they've seen a lot from Alec Pierce, and they know Josh Downs is there, and Tyler Warren is emerging as a weapon. And the Colts are in a position where they could potentially save $24 million next year by moving off of Michael Pittman. So that's what we're doing on this show. It's tough to do in season, right? Like we are so in the grind of just like we have to do this on Monday and this on Tuesday and this on Wednesday and this on Thursday. And we talked about a pre-show. Thanksgiving kind of throws a wrench in our schedule and forces us to think outside the box a little bit. And we said, hey, rather than talking about what's happening this week or next week or what happened last week, let's try to look far ahead and try to read some of the tea leaves on how things can play out this offseason. And Jeff, another guy I want to talk about is Omarion Hampton. And this is not going to come cheap at all. Omarion Hampton, you're paying up for him, but this is a guy that I think like all it's going to take is showing a little bit of signs of life at the end of the season, and we're going to be looking at him in the same tier as Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson and these other game breaking running backs. And I think the thing that people haven't really taken into account yet is this Chargers offense hasn't looked great so far this season, but they've been without Rashawn Slater all year. They have been without Joe Alt for the vast majority of the season. And I was running the numbers the other day with Joe Alt out there. Justin Herbert is scoring 27 fantasy points per game. Without Joe Alt, he's averaging 16 fantasy points per game. So this is a broken offense right now without their two bookend tackles. So whatever you see from Omarion Hampton this year, know that it is going to be better next year when they have Slater and Alt out there. So not going to come cheap. A lot of the stuff that we're doing on today's show is some bargain bin shopping. But Omarion Hampton, I mean, he's a guy that I will happily move mountains for just based off that little taste of action that we saw early in the season.
Yeah, and we saw him be actively involved in the passing game. We know that upside with that offense. You talked about it. You know that you're going to get Joel and Rashawn Slater healthy moving into next year, ideally, hopefully. And so that is a great situation to this guy. They used a first round pick on him, and we didn't get the massive rookie breakout that because had we gotten that rookie breakout, we'd be talking about him being a slam dunk first round pick in one quarterback dynasty leagues and flirting with that, being in the Superflex league, almost potentially being in that tier of running backs with right behind kind of the Bijan and the Gibbs, like that next section. I think Hampton would be locked into that. And I don't know that the certainness is definitely there on Hampton because we didn't get just a solid played out run of smash hits. But I think talking about Hampton too, I mean, Najee Harris is going to be a free agent, and that's going to be a name that makes people's skin crawl. But Najee Harris, I think that a lot of teams probably view him as a 1B starting running back in the NFL. And I think he can be had for dirt cheap free probably in your league.
Yeah, and we talked about him as a contender buy a couple of weeks ago, much to the dismay of the listeners. But that's another guy, like has the draft capital. This is a first round talent who has been productive every year of his NFL career. And it makes people skin crawl because he's old and he's inefficient and he's coming off the injury. But you could probably get him for a third round pick right now. And like he is going to perform better than almost anybody that you're drafting in the third round of your rookie drafts. Jeff, I see you got something to add there.
Yeah, I think just in general, right now, just thinking about trading in Dynasty, I know I run into it a lot. Everybody wants a draft pick, just a draft pick. They don't even want to have any conversation about anything else. But I think that these players that we're talking about are a good pivot of instead of like, hey, give me that fourth or give me that third, give me this guy that is a proven NFL player. And I think there's a lot of value if you're willing to operate within that of getting these guys that have proven themselves to be players instead of, yeah, I mean, maybe you get that third round pick and it turns into Amon-Ra St. Brown. And something like that in Dynasty is going to change the trajectory of your team. But I think more often than not, if you were to look back, and I think this is another good exercise as you get to this part of the year, if you're just kind of thinking about conceptualizing what you want to do in your Dynasty league, look at the last couple of rookie drafts and see who really was in that third and fourth round. And yeah, there'll be a guy or two that you're saying, oh man, I missed him. But then there's going to be a whole lot of guys that were really, really valued very, very highly. And you could have gotten in Tyler Allgeier instead, or some of these other players that we're going to talk about that could potentially plug into being the next Javonte Williams, the next top 12 running back.
Yeah,
or
and
easier.
sometimes those
Yeah.
boring, dusty veterans, yeah, they're just so cheap and they're easy to acquire, and because everybody wants to move off of them. So yeah, we're talking about a handful of rookies on this show, but sometimes it is those dusty veterans that everybody has written off that make for the best buys out here. Now we kind of talked about Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris, both going out and like trying to acquire both of these guys. You almost look at it like a blackjack split, right? Like you can get a situation that has two guys, know that they're going in better situations and hope that they can each hit there. So this opens up a few situations that I want to talk about. And like these are ones where I'm saying just go out and buy both of them. Like Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. It feels like you have to be in one of those camps, right, Jeff? Like you're either a Walker guy or you're a Charbonnet guy and you're not allowed to toe the line at all. I don't care. I think that they are both very, very good running backs and they win in different ways. You obviously know Ken Walker is the home run hitter, the big play guy, the guy who can do things and on big play opportunities that nobody else can really do in the NFL. Then you've got Zach Charbonnet, a guy that coaches love, a grinder, a guy who moves the sticks, a guy who can score at the goal line, and also a guy who has a very good pass catching profile as well. So we see Ken Walker coming to the end of his contract, and so many people are saying go out and buy Ken Walker before he signs with another team. And I think you should. I think it's good practice to go out and acquire Ken Walker. But Zach Charbonnet is also the guy who could be the heir apparent for this RB1 role in Seattle. So I don't think it's fair to say you have to pick one or the other. I think you should go out and acquire both of these guys in your dynasty leagues right now.
I would be going out and buying Charbonnet because he's cheaper, he's younger, he's potentially
Right.
going to be the starting running back. And I do think that I run into it a lot, and I hear sharp people say it. I hear a lot of people talk about how the committee backfields. And reality of it is I do this backfield breakdown article every single week. There's not that many committees. And the ones that are, you can't really even play the other side of the committee. There's one guy that you want here. And I think that there's this perception that the league is committee league, multiple running backs being involved. And I think the reality of it is probably we run into that a lot because the guy that we're excited about is on the wrong side of that committee. And meanwhile, the guy that we're tired of is on the right side of that committee. But I think that when you look at across the league, I think more often than not, teams want to have a bell cow back that they can feature, that they can leave
Mhm.
on the field for 3 downs, and or sometimes you get like what the Rams are doing, where Kyron Williams will play 2 series, then Blake Corum will play 1 series, and Kyron Williams will play 2 series. Then if it's a close game, they'll just leave Kyron Williams plugged in the second half. Situations like that, I think, is what teams want to gear their teams towards because they're getting backs that do have that skill set to be able to handle it. And I think they've gotten smarter with backs of not hurting backs. I mean, not in the other part too. You watch football from
And I think one thing that you're missing is so many teams have the guy that just comes in on pass blocking,
yes,
and that's something that we see like the LaQuinn Allens and the Samaje P Ryans and the Tyler Badays, these guys that like aren't running routes, they aren't getting carries, they just come in and so much of the wear and tear that we'd see from running backs were because they were taking on middle linebackers in the A gap 10 times a game, and now they just kind of have that guy that like, hey, that's your job. Like we're gonna let Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet, they're going to watch from the sidelines while George Halani comes out here and takes on this rushing blitzer. And I think that's something that NFL teams have gotten really smart about is maintaining the health of their lead backs by using these guys who are kind of pass blocking
yeah, and,
specialists.
and I think it's so as we talk about the lack of committees or committees backs moving towards bell cow backfields, grabbing some of these guys that give you the option of if you're a zero running back drafter, if you're a hero running back drafter, I think even more now than ever, you just need to have that many darts to be able to throw at the board to have because you need an injury situation to run into it more often than not. It,
Mhm.
it ends up being you're not getting these guys of like the James White cheat code or whatever it might be of like the random Rex Burkhead, where like this guy comes out of nowhere and he gives me running back 18 and he plugs my running back 2 every week because that's just what he does. You don't get that as much anymore because of exactly what you said, is splitting the work and having a side that isn't touching the ball in the work, and then also getting quarterbacks that are running with the ball, RPO action, getting wide receivers running involved in the run game, scheming up targets to those wide receivers that really become an extension of the run game. Just different situations that allow, and I think just the football is different. It's undeniably different. If
Mhm.
you, I mean, you don't have to go to Jacked Up, but if you really wanted to, you could go see a Jacked Up segment from 2008 and recognize how different the football is. But a lot of teams are more, it's the rugby tackling, it's just get the guy to the ground. Whereas it used to be a lot of striking, and it also used to be a lot of Gilbert Brown in the middle of the line. When running it into the middle of the line, now you're kind of running it into like a 295-pound defensive tackle that's just kind of worried about getting you on the ground. It used to be 375-pound Gilbert Brown would fall on you 25 times a game.
Right, and you even see, like, you know, I feel like running backs play it a little bit differently. Like there was one play just the other day where you saw Kyron Williams, like he was going right up the middle, and Vita Vea was just like there. And rather than even like dropping ahead and like trying to run through it, he just kind of like slid down. Like, yeah, I'm not taking on this 350-pound nose tackle. Like I'm just gonna go to the ground and live to see another play. So that is definitely, just a change in the NFL as a whole. But we talk about, the Seattle backfield, and there are other backfields. We talked about the Chargers, we've talked about Seattle. There's other black backfields that are going to have this split this offseason. And I want to talk about the Jets next. So many people are just like in on Breece Hall, as you should be, because if Breece Hall goes out and signs with the Bears or signs with the Kansas City Chiefs, wheels up. We're looking at a potential top 5 season from Breece Hall. But you should also, as Jeff Bell and I are going to talk about a lot on this show, go out and get the guy who is going to be the heir apparent, the guy who's still going to be in New York. And some people are going to say Isaiah Davis. You and I both like Braelon Allen a lot, and he's been hurt this entire season. He is still very, very young. But I would assume that if Brees Hall doesn't get franchise tagged, we probably see Braelon Allen as the top running back in the Jets
Yeah,
next year.
volume. I think it's an easy volume bet to see Braylon Allen as that guy that is getting the 15 touches per game, while Isaiah Davis looks good. And Isaiah Davis, I think, can augment that and complement
Yeah.
that. But you're looking for goal line, and that's the other part of it. Really looking for how is a back going to impact the game, because we get these backs like a Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt of like we talked about him prior to the season, and we said, well, we don't really know that he's the receiving down back. We don't really know that he's the goal line back. So you kind of get stuck in the middle. And sure, you can have your 60-yard days, but they end up with 6 points. And I think Braylon Allen has a very, very clear role potentially as the goal line back. Now, I think the argument might be, do the Jets actually score touchdowns? And I think that that's a fair, valid argument that maybe he's the goal line back, but do they actually get to the goal line? Because that might be a significant
We
question.
don't know what their
Yeah,
quarterback situation is. What if they bring in Mac
true,
Jones and then all of a
true.
sudden they have a good NFL offense next year?
Solve
Like
all your
they've got
problems.
the other pieces there. It's just the quarterback
That's
situation.
all you got to do. Mac Jones back in the AFC East. It'll solve all your problems. Ready to go. New York Jets. Here we go.
But yeah, and I think he is the guy who would profile for the volume here, and we talk about it so much. Like this is going to be one of those things. Remember, like Amari Cooper's in year 6, and we're like, we can't believe this guy's still 23 years old. I feel like it's the same thing with Braylon Allen. This guy was drafted 2 months after his 20th birthday. Like he is going to finish this season still 21 years old. So, this is a developmental guy. He looks significantly bigger than he did at the NFL Combine and than he did last year. Like he's still growing into his body. He's still learning how to use his physicality. They didn't draft him saying, "Hey, you're going to be our week 1 starter as a 21 or as a 20-year-old rookie, putting Breece Hall out of a job." I think they drafted him hoping that he could develop into being this workhorse running back. And if Breece Hall's out of the picture next year, that is going to be Braylon Allen's job. Another one I want to talk about, Jeff, and it's funny, like we know the perceptions. We spend time on social media, we hear what people are saying, we listen to other podcasts here and there. And it's kind of funny how like there's no it's not always the veteran that people like, and it's not always the young guy people like. Every backfield kind of has its own preferred guy. And I think right now, everybody's saying out, go out and get Bhayshul Tuten because Bhayshul Tuten is this sparked up, hyper athletic rookie. He's going to be the lead back next year in Jacksonville. I'm kind of intrigued by buying Travis Etienne, a first round pick who has looked really good through his first few seasons. And it seems like there's some fatigue here where people are just bored with Travis Etienne. He's never really given us that top 3, that top 5 ceiling that we hoped for when he was drafted in round 1. But he has been a steady high end RB2 since he came into the league. And, I talked earlier about the Bears and the Chiefs, the Commanders. You talk about Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt. They're another team that might be shopping for a running back next year. There are just so many potential good spots for running backs. And I can't imagine that a team is going to go out here and pay Travis Etienne without plans to make him a featured back or at least the 1A in a split backfield. So Etienne is the guy that's kind of getting lost in the discussion here because everybody is so overexcited about Bhayshul Tuten. But this is another one where like I will happily go out and try to acquire both of these guys before this
Yeah,
offseason.
it's these guys that Travis Etienne or we Najee Harris to start off with that had just tremendous hype and excitement as first round rookie picks and first round NFL draft picks, and they're going to take over. They're going to be a top 5 back, and then they don't ever reach that ceiling. It becomes just an absolute knee jerk reaction to declaring that they are horrible, they're bad, that there's no
Like,
business here. Whereas you can get you can do a lot of work, good work, grabbing the running back 13, 14 that kind of sits under the radar. A guy like Etienne that we've decided that he doesn't have the elite ceiling, and I think that I think there's some smart dynasty approaches that would tell you that why bother with that guy, that it's kind of going to be that running back 14, and it all really comes down to what you're paying to acquire it. And if you're moving off of an older wide receiver or something like that, or you just need to rebalance your team, or you do have a plethora of third round picks, and you say maybe I can package random player, and a couple of these picks that I don't know that they're even going to make my team, to get Travis Etienne. And I think that that's a very smart and savvy move right now.
last guy I want to talk about here, Jeff, and this is an admission. Maybe I was wrong. If anybody was watching the show, what was it, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago? You and I had a spirited debate about George Pickens and his long term value here, and I think I'm coming around to George Pickens. My big fear at the time was CeeDee Lamb. His return was looming, and I said, as soon as CeeDee Lamb comes back, George Pickens is just going to be the wide receiver too here, and he's going to be the same guy he's always been, this boomer bust wide receiver. I don't think anybody expected that George Pickens would be outscoring CeeDee Lamb, but that's what's happening in the games that they have played together since his return. Like, George Pickens is looking like the wide receiver one here. And sure, I can sit here and pick nits in his profile, his target share, and things like that, but it's not all that different to me. What I see, like, very different types of players, when you look at the size and whatnot. But like Tyreek Hill early in his career, there was a lot of nits that you could pick in his profile, his target share, his targets per route run, things of that nature. But at a certain point, he was just a dude who made plays. And like, we saw it, that he was consistently giving us these huge spike weeks in Kansas City. Then he landed in Miami, where they desperately needed a wide receiver one. Then we see the target share jump to a 30+% target share. And then he's the top scoring player in fantasy football. Now, when I look at George Pickens, I could see this shaking out a few ways. One, they can franchise tag George Pickens. Two, they can give him a huge extension to stay here. And three, which is, I think, the least likely scenario, is that he hits the market as an unrestricted free agent and becomes one of the highest paid wide receivers in football. Either way, you're looking at George Pickens either getting a big contract or staying in an offense that we see him currently giving us top 5 production in right now. So I think George Pickens is a lot of people that are trying to get out from under him. And I was one of those guys just, a month and a half ago, but I've changed my tune based on what we've seen since CeeDee Lamb has
Yeah,
returned.
he's going to get franchised at worst. There's no way that he doesn't get franchised. Just wide receivers don't hit the market. It never happens. We've talked for 3 years about
Right.
T. Higgins. If T. Higgins is on the market, and he could be any team's wide
Right.
receiver one, and then it comes up and the Bengals just pay him because it's a blue chip position. It's difficult to find these players that can produce like this. And I think worst case, if they are concerned about the off the field with George Pickens, they'll just give him a franchise tag, and they could keep that for a year or two if they wanted to, and make sure that he is under contract. It means the Cowboys are going to franchise him, and then they're going to wait until the very last day that they possibly could to sign him to an extension. They'll allow 7 other guys to get extensions at wide receiver that will just, every single one will just bump that price tag a little bit more. We know how the Cowboys operate and do business.
And you talk about T. Higgins, but like Brandon Ayuk is another one. And especially
Yeah.
given like the recent news surrounding Brandon Ayuk, he made it very clear that he did not want to be a San Francisco 49er. They were openly shopping him. They had like trade negotiations done with other teams. And I'm sure you read this report from Diana Rossini, but like, they said that when Brandon Ayuk said that he was willing to sign his contract, that Kyle Shanahan like sprinted upstairs to John Lynch's office and said, like, cancel all of the pending trades that we have. This is a guy who like clearly expressed that he didn't want to be on the team, and they still signed him to a contract rather than letting him hit the free market. You don't see this. Like, I can't remember who's the best guy to hit the free market over the last couple of years. Jacoby Myers, Christian
Yeah,
Kirk. Like, those are the guys that we see hit the free market, not a 25-year-old stud like
and
George
even I
Pickens.
remember when Jacoby Myers hit the market, it was kind of weird because they signed Juju Smith-Schuster, and everybody was kind of like around the NFL is kind of like, what? Why are you letting Jacoby Myers walk to go sign Juju Smith-Schuster? And they were right, and it ends up, yeah. And you do see mean, talking about the Patriots, Kendrick Bourne, they break the bank for Kendrick Bourne in free agency because that's what happens. You get desperate, and then these guys get big contracts that, Josh Palmer with the Bills. The Bills go out and they think that Josh Palmer plugging
Right.
him in is going to solve some answers, and that didn't solve anything. That's been not the best thing that has happened. And so, yeah, I think you're exactly right on looking at these situations. But I think just in general, and we talked about it before the year, where just kind of the way that people would lean in when we're like in best ball season about, it seems to be the injury guys, the guys coming off injuries, the guys coming off disappointing years. 9 times out of 10, they're healthy the next year and they are tremendous bargains in your draft. And then it's like the guy that had the tremendous season the year before is the one that ends up getting hurt or just kind of pulling back a little bit. And I think that especially in Dynasty right now, these guys that are just out of sight, out of mind, Brandon Ayuk just not being in the rosters, not only can you buy them for cheaper, but also it's a situation where you can't be accused of tanking if you have guys that you can't put into your lineup. If you're in a league
Right.
that decides draft order based upon projected points, everybody's looking for those picks. And I think that's where I really keep coming back to, is everybody's looking for draft picks. And it's kind of frustrating to me. Like, everybody's just wants draft picks, and like, well, maybe I can give you this young wide receiver that your 0-13 team could actually use in the future at some point. And you can give me this dusty old running back. No, but you want a third round pick instead. And I think that at some level, especially later picks, some of these guys that have already made it to the NFL and are already playing roles, and maybe those roles will grow. And I think one of the other interesting things that my Monday article yesterday, I wrote a longer than normal introduction and kind of dove into yards per route run, because everywhere I'm seeing Luther
Mhm.
Burden, just yards per route run, and yards per route run is the golden standard. And we see it the other way.
Have you seen Jameis Winston's yards per
Let's
route
say
run?
leading the league. 33 yards per route run, James Winston, number one in the league. Caleb Williams is actually, I think, number four in the league for like 5.5 yards per route run. Caleb Williams, excellent in yards
Mhm.
per route run right now. But I think that overall, I dove into a couple of these guys that you mentioned, Pickens, and you look at Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you look at Rome Odunze, you look at Trey McBride. These guys all had horrible yards per out runs as a rookie. What happened was they were on the field, they were learning how to be an NFL player on the field, and I think that yards per out run swings the other way a little bit. I completely understand the argument of the coach wants to get the ball in the guy's hands, but at the same time, why doesn't the coach want the guy on the field when he's not getting the ball in his hands? What's going on here of like Brashad Smith in Kansas City, excellent yards per out run, because every time he comes in, it's a designed throw it to Brashad Smith and have him run for 6 yards. It's not anything of learning how to play running back. And I think that looking at somebody, recognizing talent and recognizing, because we do get a discount off these guys. That was the argument about Jackson Smith and Jigba, was a horrible yards per route run after his rookie year. And George Pickens was another guy. He's just out there. They're not giving them the ball. He's just out there. And I think that it's just an interesting way to recognize that they're out there. They're learning how to play on the NFL field. They're learning what they need to do to become these players that now we're seeing these fantasy superstars here. And then we see these other guys like a Laviska Shenault, excellent yards per route run, because every time that they put Laviska Shenault in the game, they just gave him the ball because he didn't know how to do anything else. And so I think that there can be an argument made on the other side that sometimes you really need to look at the context and the situation for some of these things.
Yeah, you talk about yards per route run, of course. Like when I'm looking through the incoming rookie class, Trey Harris's yards per route run blew my mind, like over 4 yards per route run at Ole Miss last year. And I was like, that is a number that I just like, that's unfathomable. Nobody else hits that number. And I went back historically to see like when the last time a player's had yard per route run that high in college. And funny enough, it was Laviska Shenault, who maintained a similar elite yards per route run when he was in college or when he made it to the pros, but obviously had a very small sample size. Now I don't want to completely
No,
discredit yards
no.
per route run because it does help us find some players like Rashi Rice. We saw it his rookie season, yards per route run off the charts. And then what happened? He became a full time player, maintained his efficiency, and has just been Rashi Rice ever since. So I think that it's a small piece of the puzzle. And that's it. There is no one metric that tells all, like everything is a piece of the puzzle. And that's why, Jeff, you and I, like, we don't scoff at
No.
analytics people, we don't scoff at film people. We see everything is useful. Like, I think in order to play this game, especially dynasty football, we're projecting long term, you need to understand talent. You need to understand the efficiency metrics. You need to understand the film. You need to understand coaching tendencies. You need to understand schematics. Like, there are so many things that go into this game. And I think that yards per route run has its use, but it is not the end all be all of metrics that we need to identify talent.
Yeah, just ask yourself of how did this happen? How did they become this? And the other thing that
Mhm.
we've talked before on the show, just in other content that we've done about these running backs that can be in a satellite back situation and they're given the ball in space and they're great metrics there, and then they shift into being a bell cow type role and everything just craters. I mean, Tony Pollard is a great example of that. Tony Pollard looked like the most efficient running back possible, and then he becomes a bell cow role in Dallas, and he's just getting beat on, and the numbers just aren't there to back it up. And I think you're exactly right. It's not to scoff at any of whatever you're using in analysis or you're using in to decide in your dynasty teams. It all has value and all has merit, but I think understanding the next layer is understanding how do they accumulate it? Is that scalable, or is this a situation where the coach just had him in there because they could design some trick plays to him, but overall, is there higher level development that is allowing them to become the player that is on the field every single down? And the other side of it too, I think the more value is to look at the Rome Odunze or the Jackson Smith and Jigba or the George Pickens, that you say this guy is talented. I believe he's talented. I see him make these plays. He's just not, for whatever reason, going to him repeatedly, and find those diamonds in the rough, find those guys that can rise above that situation and can really grow their game. Nico Collins is another guy that it's really the top of. I think it's just so interesting because you run into two real archetypes right now, I think, in fantasy wide receivers of those. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the slot guy, that the guy that can handle volume, and
Mhm.
they're gonna immediately have a higher yards per out run because that's how an offense is structured to get the ball in their hands. And but then you also get these guys that they're the twitched up, the explosive athletes. I mean, didn't really hold it up throughout the year, but Quentin Johnston starting out the season hot the way that he did, and he still makes a play occasionally, or just some of these players that I think the overall consensus tends to be too knee jerk reactive when they don't have a strong metric there. But when you watch the game, or you can identify, hey, I mean, George Pickens is
You
out
tell
there with,
from Nico Collins' rookie season. Nico Collins
yeah,
was a dude as a rookie. Like, he was out there making plays that few other guys could make, and, it was a bad offensive environment, and the target share wasn't there, but it took him 3 years to figure it out. Now he's Nico Collins. Now he's just like a plug and play wide
yeah,
receiver 1.
exactly right.
Let me ask you real quick. We talked about Malik Neighbors as a dynasty buy on this show a couple weeks ago. Let me run a trade by you, Jeff. I just traded on a rebuilding roster where I already have a slew of guys on my IR spot. I was able to trade Nico Collins and Rico Dowdle for Malik Neighbors. What are
That's
your
a
thoughts
great
on that
trade.
one?
That's exactly what you want to do in Dynasty.
I know. I just wanted you to pat me on the back and make me feel good because I was pretty happy with pulling that one off. But Jeff, any final thoughts before we wrap up today? I want to say real quickly that I am feeling especially grateful. We are recording this on Tuesday night, and head over to the Football Guys live show or the live channel on YouTube if you want to check it out. We just got off a show with me and you. We're both there, hosted by Joey Wright and Jake Bryant. We were joined by Joe Bryant, Alfredo Brown, Jeff Blaylock, Scott Fish, Bob Gilchrist, Adam Hutchison. Just a really fun time where we just kind of like hung out, no show sheet, just doing some trivia, hanging out, and it's stuff like that that makes me feel like really, really thankful and happy to be a part of this company.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know. I don't know that I want to get too philosophically deep on this because I am feeling all the Thanksgiving love going on and everything. But I will say that I
Right.
think that prior to getting involved in fantasy football, I think it's as you age, as you move through your life, you end up in, you've got young kids, and it ends up kind of being isolating at times. If you're not, you kind of run
Mhm.
into a situation, your friends that you grew up with, your college friends, they also have kids, they're busy in those lives, and you kind of reach a point where I don't know, I know for me personally, I felt like I reached a point where I wasn't sure if I like, how do you make a friend? Like, how do you like make new friends? It's like there were legitimate times where I thought like I'm just out of the stage of my life where I make new friends, and then that was before I met Dave and Joey and these people that I talk to every single day. I'm looking forward to hanging out with them in less than 2 months now. At this point, we get together twice per year if we're lucky to be able to hang out in person. But the Las Vegas retreat is coming up with football guys, and I think that that's the and you all out there, like, we're just so thankful for the football guys community, because the interactions that we get from you all, it's just so much fun to um, know that people are listening to you, know that people are reading you. It means a lot, because sometimes it can be isolating of like, we work really hard and we're looking at a screen basically, and sometimes we get to do a show with a friend, and other than that it can be a little bit of an isolating experience. But knowing that there are people that makes it part of your weekly routine and what you're looking forward to, and helps you win your league, but also it helps you make you feel like you're part of something, because I think that overwhelmingly is what we are aiming to do at football guys. When you really look at what is the secret sauce, what are we trying to do, and it's really just become one with you, and show that the community that we can build through fantasy football.
Yeah, and something, Sigmund Bloom talks about it all the time, routines and rituals, and we're so thankful to everybody who has made the show a part of their routine and their ritual, and hopefully we are leading you in the right direction to helping you win your fantasy football leagues. We're just doing this one episode this week rather than the normal two episodes, with the holiday and whatnot, but we will be back Friday as always with our mega matchup preview. Of course, that'll be after the 3 games on Thursday, so we'll just have the remaining games to look forward at. We'll try to cover the Bears and Eagles before that one kicks off. We'll be bright and early Friday morning. I want to thank everybody so much for taking the time to tune in today. We'll be back Friday with our matchup preview episode. Have a great Thanksgiving, and we will see you soon.